Welcome to the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask questions down below this video in the comments section, and we pick from those each week. I think Steph written down 22 from this past week, but we had also written down some others because there was a question and answer video yesterday as well. I did 2 question and answer videos this weekend because we had the open garden event Friday and Saturday, and you guys had asked so many great questions. We thought we'd catch up in the midst of getting ready for this event. Hopefully it all went well. Hopefully some of you watching this video were here and we got to meet you. Hopefully get to meet some of the rest of you in future years as well. We'll hopefully next year have that, have the native garden much more filled out and much more a part of the overall garden experience here. And some other things, of course, will change because, I never stop changing the garden. The Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner are both $50 off for the rest of the month. 2 codes are on the screen right now if you can use. I think that'll be another week and a half or so that both of them are discounted. If you're interested in either one of those, there's a good description. The links are down below the video, and there's a good description of each of them there if you want to take a look at that. We appreciate it, and we appreciate anything. Coming to the event, buying t-shirts, watching the video, just simply watching the videos. I said this in yesterday's video. So much opportunity has come on this channel for me in horticulture that despite the fact that I had 40 years of experience in horticulture, would have never taken place without this audience that watches these videos. So I can't speak, I can't say enough to thank you guys for all parts. It doesn't matter simply watching a video to buying the weekly garden planner, and everything in between is all appreciated. So thank you guys so much. Let's see. Well, we'll jump into some questions. How about that? Nelly. So this person has a Nelly Stevens hedge. The wife wants to add some green giants mixed into the screen. Wonder if the thuja will grow faster and choke out the Nellies. I don't think they'll necessarily choke out the Nellies. I mean, obviously they'll harm the Nellies. I mean, green giant arborvitae, and I know they're attractive. I know I see borders of them growing where they're 25 feet tall and they're just perfect soldiers, but they never stop growing. So at some point they're 65 feet tall and they're 15, 18 feet wide at the base, and the bottom at 10 feet of it's kind of, you can see right through them because they're shading themselves down below. And so if you happen to have a neighbor that's 20 feet tall, they can't see through it because 20 feet up, it's a good screen, but down low, it's not particularly a good screen. And they eat a lot of space. And so, if I was in Connecticut and I wanted something, there are a few new thuja plicatas or green giant-like arbs that grow a little slower, grow a little smaller that you might consider. A few named ones that have been released out on the market. If you are going to introduce these, I would probably have it where you have like 5 Nelly Stevens and then like 3 of the arborvitas or something like that. So they're in groupings, not every other one or something like that, because those conifers they'll harm each other is what will happen. You're not going to kill a Nelly Stevens holly. Nelly Stevens holly probably grow in the middle of those things where you can't even see them hardly. They would look terrible, obviously, but they're tough, once established, extremely tough plants that will hold their own, but neither will look good. That would be my thing. I think there are very few people that actually need green giant arborvitae as a screen, unless you're living in a space where the terrain is such that, your neighbor's got a window that's basically 3 stories above your garden or something like that, looking down on you. That's the kind of area that a green giant might be useful for. But for a lot of other people, I don't know how old you are, but if you're in that house for 20 or 30 years, at some point, they're going to be bigger probably than the space will hold. Okay. That was a long number 1 answer, wasn't it? Do we have a video on our mixed border screen? Yes, we do. I have a couple of mixed border screening videos. If you just go to the homepage for HortTube with Jim Putnam on YouTube, there's a little search button there, and you can search the videos and just do screening plants, mixed borders. I've got a video with 50 different screening plants. I've got a video with all kinds of screening plant stuff. I've got one with just the 17 plants that are in this screen. 13, I counted last week. and a couple of other videos on the topic as well. So, and I think there's an entire playlist for screening plants as well, and they're all in that. Okay. In any other videos on plants for privacy screens, we do have, I do talk about it in the Learn to Garden video series as well. So it will also be part of that as well, and some design stuff from Steph as well. But again, lots of videos on screening plants over the years. So somebody bought quart size Stevens holly. I'm guessing Nelly Stevens holly. This is Nelly Stevens Day. With 3 branches. What is the process for pruning it to create a bushy shrub? You need to let them grow for a little while. So transition them into the ground or another or larger container or whatever. Let them put on some growth. What we did in the nursery was I would do probably like a third where, okay, so I would let the plant grow like a foot, and then I'd take 4 inches of that off. And I'd let it grow a foot and take 4 inches of that off. So every time it grew some, I'd take a third of that growth off, if that makes any sense. And I just keep doing that, and that keeps it in kind of a constant state of growth. But with the plant this small, I think you want to let it get transitioned into the ground before you start forcing it to grow. So let it sit there for a while. Once it starts putting on some growth, you can go into that take a third off thing. You can start that in the spring every year until you get some size on them. And then later you'll probably want them to flower and berry once they get bigger. But in the meantime, who cares if they flower and berry? You're just trying to get size on them. This person has plants back ordered until midsummer, and they're bare root and potted. So I guess they were dug in the winter and then potted into a container, and then they're rooted out and they send them to them. Should they pot them up and keep them in the shade until it cools down? So, I don't know where you live, first of all, but if I was up in the north, I think you'd probably want to go ahead and get them in the ground. Some of this is going to be how well are they rooted. I mean, I would get bare root trees and bare root shrubs out of Tennessee in the winter and container plant them, and it would be fall typically before they were fully rooted out into that container. They go through it's a heck of a shock, right, to get dug out of a field and then go into a container. But some things would be rooted in, like really quickly. Like so it's so random. If I got 100 field grown of a particular viburnum out of Tennessee and put it in a container, within a month, 10 of them are probably done, finished plants, and then another 40 of them have not even hardly rooted into the pot yet at all. So that was a little bit random, in how they grew out. So it might be a plant to plant issue as to whether or not you need to keep them in the pots. If you flip them over, start to take them out and you realize all the soil is going to fall off of them, I think those are candidates to stay in the pots for a while until they have a root system on them. But if they're well rooted in and you're in the north, I'd probably put them in the ground. If you're in South Louisiana, it's 100 degrees already, every day, you might wait till fall. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked my opinions on Vitex. Would I recommend them? Do we find ours to be invasive? So there are areas in the country where Vitex can be seedy, but it's probably not all cultivars. We have that Summertime Blues Vitex, which I think is a fantastic plant, but probably not a great candidate to have been limbed up the way I did. It's got so many bees on it right now. I'm looking over it right now. It's just alive. The top of that plant is completely alive. So I love that Vitex. All of our native bees are just love that thing. I mean, just absolutely. I was walking around one day going, where are all our bees? And then you look up at that Vitex and realize all the bees are in the Vitex. They just keep working those flowers all day long. So they're not invasive in our area. And so this is one of those things where, the internet basically opened up the whole world for you to see gardeners in other places in the country, and where one gardener may be telling you that something is invasive, and that may be an area specific invasiveness. And that's true across the board. Barberries, we got every kind of invasive back here in my mind that we could have, but there are no barberries, despite barberries that are invasive in the Northeast being planted all over this neighborhood. Okay, but they're not invasive here. So, as you're hearing those things, it's place to place. But here, no, that plant is not invasive. But we got plenty of invasives, but some of our invasives are probably not invasive in other places. They don't have the length of time in the season to set the seed. They get late frost every year, so the flowers don't produce, whatever. I mean, if something happens, that, you know, maybe you have a bird that eats the seed. I mean, whatever. I mean, there's something that's going on that makes it invasive in one place and not invasive in another. It's probably, could be rainfall, could be the amount of cold you're getting in the winter time to get those seeds chilled, all those kinds of things. But interesting, but not invasive here. Okay. So somebody said Griffin is an interesting looking fellow. What's his lineage? Yeah, we got him tested. He is an interesting fellow. All right. He is 25% pug, which has got that curly tail. And then he's 12.5% black lab, chow, shih tzu, and basset hound. And then 25% of tons of other stuff. He is literally every dog you've ever seen in your entire life put into one dog. He is he's a strange dog. He's the funniest thing, because I think, you know, there's some angles you look at him and go, wow, what a strange looking dog. And then he'll turn around and sit and look at you and turn his head sideways, and you're like, that's the cutest dog I've ever seen. So he, you know, it's interesting how, but you know, we love him. He's an interesting character, though. He is an interesting character, and the only dog in my entire life that I consider kind of untrainable. I mean, just, you know, barking at the mailman and, you know, whatever. He does everything that you've ever seen in a cartoon dog is him. So if I brought a bag of soil into the house, within 10 minutes, he would dig through that plastic bag and be throwing dirt on the walls, okay? And be burying something in that bag. If you give him, he loves those broccoli stalks. If I give him a broccoli stalk and then just let him out this back door, he would come over here to this bed, dig a giant hole in it, and bury his broccoli stalk out here to keep for later. We would give him and Holly the same bone, you know, whatever, rawhide bone, whatever it was. And he would take his, go hide it under a pillow somewhere or under a bed someplace, and then he'd come back and just watch Holly, knowing that she would get bored of it at some point. Then he would take it and go hide it. And then he would spend the rest of the day taking those two bones and thinking that somebody was going to steal them and moving them about the house. I mean, he's just so feral. Anyway, interesting. Let's see. So this person has a bed that with some grasses and some hostas in it, and it's been taken over by pennywort. So basically an invasive weed. A weed is just kind of come through the bed completely. Do they need to pull out the plants and deep mulch it instead? It's also a poor drainage location. This is one of those situations probably. If I had a bed that was, my neighbor's got Creeping Charlie over there. If that Creeping Charlie came through and just took over an entire bed over here, the best way probably is to dig some of those plants up, kill everything that's there, and then replant the plants. And so you could deep mulch it at that point if you wanted to. That may help the plants in the future. Or you can just, you know, if it's a poor drainage location, you can mound it up in some way, fix that drainage in some way, and then come back in with those plants back into it. But yes, sometimes it is a do-over. What are my favorite large leaf shade plants other than tractor seat plants? So if you can grow Farfugium tractor seat plant, then this is obviously in the shade. What are some other things that have large leaves? This is the beauty of a lot of shade gardens, is that the plants do have large leaves on them. If you're an understory plant, like that Magnolia grandiflora is an understory plant. I've got big leaf magnolia back here too with the big giant leaves on it. A lot of those understory plants do have really large leaves because they can't get but a little bit of light through the upper trees up there. And so it's basically a giant solar panel. You know, the bigger the leaf, it's not advantageous in the full sun to have a leaf this big though, because, you know, then it's going to burn. But in the understory, you know, of the forest, you know, it is advantageous. But things like hosta, you know, you can get very large leaf hostas. We've shown a few, we did a hosta video a week or two ago. A couple of them were very large leafed varieties. We have acanthus back here. Acanthus is a good choice. We have Chinese May apples and our native May apples. We have Fatsia over here. We have Fatshedra. Fatshedra doesn't have quite the big a leaf as the Fatsia does. Brunera. I'm trying to think if there's any what else is going to, but lots of things. This is where you get to have fun shopping, is that when you're doing a shade garden, and I have found shade gardening just more and more interesting over the years, because there's a lot of flowers here, and if you came to the open garden, you know how many flowers are here. We love flowers, not poo-pooing flowers in any way, shape, or form, but we have a lot of plants out here that we don't rely on flowers for, and they're all about texture and the foliage color and the leaf shapes and all those kinds of things. And in that shade garden back there, boy, you can really work with those different textures and have fun with it. So have fun in that area. Aspidistra, of course, hydrangeas, acuba back there. Almost all of those things have, you know, really, really large leaves. Okay, let's see. Any plans to visit other YouTubers this year? And they said Creekside with a question mark. We've gone to I've gone to Creekside a couple times and filmed with Jenny and Jerry, like those folks a lot, and we're in the same state, obviously. I am not planning on going there this year. What we are going to see Aaron, the Impatient Gardener, when is that? I think it will be like the end of September, beginning of October is when we'll be there. We've actually already, there's a state park right next to her that we stayed in before with the RV. It's super, super cool. It's a super nice park that's on Lake Michigan. So looking forward to spending a couple nights there at that state park and doing a little bit of filming and hanging out with Erin. We've enjoyed our time with her last time. She made us a wonderful dinner, and we got to talk about her garden. And there's a video on her channel from that with me, and a video, you know, obviously with her on our channel. And there, who knows, could be someone else on that list as well. We're going around a lot of the country before this year's over with. Let's see. Somebody asked about root washing new plants. What's my opinion? Is it bad internet advice? So if I was going to root wash, so root washing is basically taking the plant out of a container and washing all of the soil off of it and getting all the roots pulled out that would have been circling one another. Okay, if you were planting a tree, the only thing I'd probably root wash is a tree, because, you know, I do see tons of trees planted out in the world where you see roots wrapping around the trunk and choking the trunk, or you'll see roots wrapped around roots. And all that started probably in a container and was never corrected. It was never really broken apart well. At a minimum, you should definitely, if the roots are wrapping around one another, you should pull at them for sure. We probably should have more people growing in containers that are treated to burn the roots. You'll see the occasional container that looks like it's painted on the inside, and that's literally to burn the roots. Or you'll see some plants grown in fabric materials, because when oxygen hits those roots, it burns them and it kills them. So when the root gets to the edge of that fabric, or whatever chemical they're using to paint the entire side of the container, it burns the end of that root. And instead of that root hitting that wall and then starting to wrap around, it just creates branches in that root. So we probably should all be growing in some sort of container that's meant to keep the roots from wrapping around one another anyway, but we're not. So if you have a tree, it's really your long-term investment. You really want to make sure that those roots aren't wrapping around one another. A maple would be a great example of this. If you're planting one of the red maples, which you guys know I don't like in most landscape situations. Probably though, when you pull it out of the container, it's just solid roots. Those things are root so aggressively in a container. They need to really be broken apart. That would be a good candidate for root washing. You'd want to do it when they're dormant though. I would not want to buy one in June and go home and wash the soil off the roots, because with the leaves on it, because that could be bad. You could actually kill the tree. So it would need to be timed appropriately to it being cool outside or the plant being dormant in order to do that kind of root washing. But it is interesting. I'm not going to worry about it with most shrubs, but I do get after the roots. You know, I don't want, you know, I'm trying to prevent as much circling roots as I can when I'm planting. It is not bad internet advice, but for some, if it's mistimed, you know, it could be pretty devastating to the plant for sure. If it's, you know, if you do try to do that on a 90-degree day when the plant's trying to grow, it's not going to go well for you probably. So this was a pretty funny person. This person just said, you know, when they go on a walk, they're kind of no fun because they're always pointing out the plants. And there's a lot of jokes about that, where people that just can't stop talking about the plants, you know, wherever they go. And it just reminded me of a story. My son, we were touring UNC Chapel Hill. He ended up going to Elon ultimately, but we were touring, you know, UNC Chapel Hill, and he looks at me and, you know, we're in a tour group, and, you know, everybody's looking at the buildings because there's a lot of old architecture there. It's one of the country's oldest public universities. And everybody's looking at the buildings and all the old architecture and everything there. And Charlie turns around to me and says, "I hate you right now." And it was because all he could see was the plants. You know, having grown up in it, once you really focus in on them, I would imagine there's a lot of people like this now from COVID. Like, they hadn't even noticed the plants, you know, and then COVID happened, made them sit still for a minute. They started gardening a little bit, and now they just can't stop, you know, thinking about the plants. And so you go from, you know, looking up at buildings to looking down at plants, and it can happen to you, you know, that quick. And it was just funny when he said that to me. It was like, he's kind of just sick of looking at the plants all the time. But once you can ID them all, you're just IDing them. That's what you're doing. You're just kind of taking notes on them. It's kind of funny. Let's see. And the other thing I was going to say, when I speaking at the plant symposium, I may have gotten one of the best compliments I've ever gotten. And it was, someone said to me, when I first started watching your channel, you know, whatever you were talking about, I wanted to go out and buy it and put it in my garden. And now when I'm watching your channel frequently, when you're putting something in, I already have it. And that to me was like the best compliment. It was just, they had gotten some sort of love of this, that they had gone out on their own searching for things that were interesting and different for their garden, and not just following along with this garden. Obviously, we want people to watch, and we love that people watch, and we want people to participate and ask questions and buy shirts and all the kind of things that we do on this channel so we can continue to do this content. But I also want people watching to develop some sort of, you know, thing where they're, you know, you're seeking out something that's different for your garden, and we're adding as much genetic diversities to our gardens as possible, rather than copying everything. You know, you're getting out ahead almost, you know, because the content on this channel is just kind of paced, you know, like this, and whatever time we have here in the garden. So to me, it was kind of nice to hear someone who kind of say, you know, I started watching it, loved it, and now I'm a plant nerd. Is basically it, right? So that was, I enjoyed hearing that. So, okay, the vast ideas about the best way to native garden. Okay, so much finger pointing on how it should be done. Does this get us down as we work on our new native garden? Everyone's definition is different. Obviously, anytime I put up a video and I say native garden over there, it's like, what's a native? I'm always gonna get that question, native to where? And I said from the beginning, it's gonna be natives to the Southeast United States, almost entirely. But that may be something that's native in the Southeast. It's also native up to Canada or over to Missouri or down to Mexico, possibly even over to California somehow. So there'll be a lot of overlap, but it'll mainly be things that are native to the Southeast. And then a lot of it is named cultivars and varieties, and we're just having fun over there, you know, and showing off some plants that maybe people haven't used before. It does not get me down in any way, shape, or form. That plant symposium I went to last week had all types of speakers in it. You know, we had somebody from China talking about evergreen oaks in the wild in China, and we had someone from one of the brands talking about branded plants, and we had people talking about other native plants. We had people talking about ecology, botany, horticulture, and all overlapping. And I think we need to all realize that stoking a love of plants in whatever way we can, not invasive plants, but stoking people's love of plants will get us to where we need to be, saving a lot of these species that we're losing on this planet: insects, birds, mammals, plants. things under the ground that we don't even know the names of. You know what I mean? So all of these things are working together. You know, and it's one of the things I like about that plant symposium every year here in Raleigh. It's got all types of things, and I think people go into it and go, well, this talk's not really for me, but they are all interconnected. It's all interconnected at the end of the day. Okay. So somebody asked about compost tea for spraying on foliage or soaking roots. And I know a lot of people do this. There's a ton of videos about making compost tea. I'm more, why aren't you just using the compost? Just use the compost. Put the compost around, you know, top dress these containers with the compost. And then every time you water, you'll be making compost tea, you know, down through the container. I just have, it's just a lot of work to me when I could just use the compost and not, basically running water through compost and the liquid that comes out of it, the tea that comes out of it, using that as kind of a fertilizer. Again, you can just top dress things with the compost, and every time you water them, it'll happen on its own. Okay. Okay, so this person said, I say I don't water unless I have to. Elaborate on what that means or looks like. I just have to check. You know, I've got a few plants out here, so I don't ever water to the driest plant. And I have, boy, this is hard to teach. Gosh, I had this the hardest time in the nursery. You know, we have some things in the nursery that would wilt every afternoon. But by the time the sun went down, they just peak right back up. But the guys that I had working for me at the nursery, they'd see that one thing wilting in the field and go, I got to turn the water on. And they turned the water on this, a bunch of stuff that didn't need water. So be careful watering to the driest thing in your garden. So if I water to my big leaf hydrangeas, you know, the needs of my big leaf hydrangeas, because they wilt every afternoon here in the South, then I'm going to be drowning this garden. And so there are a couple pretty well-established perennials out here. If they looked a little peaked, I definitely would water everything at that point. But it's about checking. We plant, so I'll say I plant frequently enough out here that I'll occasionally dig a hole and go, wow, it's really dry. You know, because I'm 3-4 inches down in there and it's kind of dusty, basically. Then I know that the whole garden probably needs to be watered. So it's really about checking. Old, well-established shrubs in the southeast where I'm at, where we have humidity. Humidity is a big, important player, right? Out west, you may not have that humidity. So even though it gets a little dry here because it's 90 degrees, maybe the breeze is blowing, it's thick out here. I mean, I'm sweating while I'm having this conversation right now. You know, I've got sweat all over my arms. Those plants are getting that water too, you know, from the air. And so they don't need it as much as you think they do. But take a shovel, take a trowel somewhere, dig down. If it's, you know, if you're 2-3 inches down in the ground and it's still dry, it's probably time to water. So it's just literally, and then they wanted to know if is that every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, more. Those are literally the unanswerable questions. Everybody wants if you water every 10 days, you'll have these results. Well, what if it rains? How humid is it? You know, how dry is the air? You know, what's the daytime temperatures? What's the nighttime temperatures? So much goes into how a garden is going to dry out. How much soil prep have you done over the years? You know, is it the type of soil that if it rains if I get 3 inches of rain this afternoon, and we're hoping for a thunderstorm this afternoon as we're preparing for the open garden tomorrow, if I get 3 inches of rain this afternoon, it'll soak completely into the ground here. Yours may not. So you may be watering more frequently because you have runoff. Okay, a lot in that, but I'm just making sure that you understand there is no pattern. There is no pattern, except for maybe in Las Vegas or Phoenix or LA or someplace where the rain is really predictable, you know, and the temperatures are kind of consistent. You probably can find a pattern in those places where it's consistent low humidity, consistent no rain, consistent summer temperatures. But here, I don't think you'd ever find an actual pattern. Okay. This person's new to gardening. Are you still offering virtual consultations? There can just have some confusions, questions to ask. Yes, over on the website, up at the top, one of the links says consultations, if you're interested in consultations. I've blocked out a lot of the rest of the year because we're going to the Netherlands and Belgium to do some filming, and we're going to Canada, and we're going to Oregon, and we're going to and like I said, Wisconsin to see Aaron. So we're going to a lot of places the rest of this year. So there's only a few days the entire rest of this year if you're interested in getting a consultation. Okay, and thanks for asking. Let's see. Are there trees that need less room for roots and are tolerant of poor urban soils and spaces? Yes, and this is the type of thing that you can probably observe in your area based on where you are in the country. We have in front of I go have coffee with a group every morning, you know, early in the morning, most mornings. And right across the street from us are these little boxes where they have trees growing, and all of the oaks are doing fantastic. The red maples tend to suffer because, again, they just get so root bound, and they're just terrible when they're contained. Some of the crepe myrtles do okay. Some of them get a lot of aphids and bark scale and that kind of thing when they're under stress in those boxes. Some of the Chinese elms do really well in those contained spaces. We had them planted in our parking lot at Rake and Hoe Garden Center when I was a teenager, and they did fantastic in very small spaces without additional irrigation. So yes, there are trees. I would observe it in your area. Okay, that's the main thing I can tell you. Start observing it. Get a plant ID and start looking at what trees are really thriving in those spaces, because there are trees that will take it. We see them all over New York City and cities all over America, including Raleigh. But oaks tend to be okay with it. It shortens their lives. Somebody said, I said in a video a week or two ago that the oak trees in this neighborhood are 90 years old and they're starting to decline. And the comment down below was, well, they live hundreds of years. Yeah, absolutely, they live hundreds of years. And this one right here behind me might be one of those because it has a giant area to root out into. But a lot of the other ones in this neighborhood were planted between sidewalks and near houses and other things, and it definitely has shortened their lives. It's sped up their growth though, substantially. So they've been watered and irrigated because those people were growing grass and washing their cars, and they fertilized their lawns and all kinds of things. So these trees are probably what the equivalent of a 250-year-old oak would have been had it been growing on its own in leaner conditions, if that makes any sense. So these have really raced ahead. And they're one after another, for whatever reason, coming down in the neighborhood. But they're good candidates for 30 or 40 years for sure in one of those little boxes. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. We've got 90-year-old ones growing between the sidewalk and the street. It's unbelievable. Let's see. Various varieties: red oaks, white oaks, willow oaks, lots of different ones. Is there a reason to keep Golden Falls redbud branches off the ground? They like it on the ground. No, there's no reason that I couldn't let that thing go down to the ground and grow across the ground. Grin, we crowd the garden though, so I don't have any place for those branches to go, so that's why I keep cutting mine up. But you can absolutely let them get down to the ground and start spreading out if you want to. They look kind of cool. It's like a wedding dress or something down on the ground. And then next question, it should be, again, this channel could be called Red Buds with Jim. And I think we're going to film with Denny Werner again. Speaking of which, the Golden Falls redbud inventor. Let's see. He was speaking at the plant symposium, and we hadn't seen him in a couple years. So nice catching up with him and others there. Do Golden Falls redbud trees tend to lose their inner leaves as they grow aggressively? Yeah, I mean, they're shading the middle. So if I went in there and looked in that window in that thing, almost certainly the interior of it's going to be a little bit naked. Bryce Lane is another person we saw there. I'm hoping to film with Bryce again in the next month or two as well. Let's see. Are all mulches fairly equivalent to deterring weeds? Is any one better? I think mulches that will form some sort of crust are going to be slightly better. I don't want a really thick crust on it, but ones that form, so that's why I use triple shredded hardwood mulch. It forms a bit of a crust right on the top. I need water to get down through it, so I don't want a really thick, super thick crust that water just kind of runs off the top of. But it forms kind of a crust, whereas bark mulches or like pine bark mulch or something that's chunky is not necessarily going to do. They're all going to be better than nothing for sure, but I think the shredded bark mulches that have a little bit of wood in them, that kind of, they're different sizes and shaped materials, so they just kind of lock in on one another and they form a bit of a crust, are the best ones for deterring weed growth. Let's see. Somebody asked the secret to Gerber daisies. They're in full sun, Georgia 8A. Heard they don't like full afternoon sun, but they like do they prefer full sun? Ours are in what you would call full sun in the front garden, and they do great. Again, I have a crowded garden, so think about their roots being the actual issue, okay? There's a lot of plants like this that it's not about the flowers and the foliage want to be up in the sun, the roots want to be in the shade. And so I've got 4 large Gerber daisies that people have seen in the last couple of days. They're in a crowded neighborhood, and they're very happy in a crowded neighborhood with their roots shaded. Let's see. This person has yellowing hydrangea leaves. They tried iron, but no improvement. I don't know why your hydrangea leaves are yellow. If it's an iron deficiency, you'll see the veins in the leaves very clearly. Okay, that's the indicator. Just solid yellow leaf doesn't necessarily mean that it's an iron deficiency. So I don't know one way or the other what deficiency you have. Obviously you have some sort of deficiency, and I can't really diagnose that. You can get a soil test done. You can ask your extension agent in your area if there's a reason that hydrangeas, I don't know what type of hydrangea this was either. Let's say it's a big leaf hydrangea. But iron deficiencies have a very distinct look to them. You have gardenias and you'll see the mid veins are darker and the rest of the leaf is kind of yellow. That's usually an indication of an iron deficiency, which usually means your pH is too high. You may have plenty of iron in the soil. You may get a soil test and find out you have plenty of iron, but your pH is too high, okay? And in that case, you have to use sulfur or something to try to adjust the pH, or nothing, and you can just grow plants that are more meant for that space. That's probably the better option, but I know people want what they want, and so you can try some soil manipulation. But you may want to, if you're having issues with plants, and you can't figure out why, I wouldn't start throwing nutrients at them. Iron, calcium, magnesium, anything, until you had some sort of soil test to go on, or an expert in your area that may recognize this as something that happens in your area with that particular plant. Okay, all right. Soil chemistry, again, I've said it before, you can put stuff down, you can't take it back out, okay? You're better off missing something than you are having too much of it. Because if you're missing it, you can add it a little bit at a time. If you have too much of it, you can't get it back out. Okay, let's see. This will be the last question for this week. This person planted 3 camellias and 1 gardenia under a cherry laurel canopy. They made it into spring and then died. Is the cherry laurel allelopathic, or likely the tree just outcompeted for water during a dry spring? Likely it outcompeted for water during a dry spring. So there are trees like black walnut's kind of famous for being allelopathic, meaning it actually has a chemical in the roots and in the leaves and in this to prevent other things from growing around it. It basically stunts the other things around it. It's a pretty good piece of adaptation to make sure that you kind of dominate a space. For sure, there are plants that are adaptable to it. Typically, though, it doesn't just kill things dead. So it usually will make things struggle more than just kill them outright. It may kill them in time, but it's not going to just one day your plants are going to be dead because of this. It's not like the plant has Roundup in it. It just has a deterrent for other things rooting into that space. So I think that probably, yes, you have here's the thing, when you plant new things under established things, it's going to take longer to establish the new things. Okay, I can plant something right here where there's no root competition and water it once and not have to water it for the rest of the summer if I get some regular rainfall. If I plant something on that back line back there with all that roots competition from those trees, I've got to water it the rest of the summer and probably next summer as well. It's just going to take longer for that plant to be able to compete with the other plant. So that's likely what it was. So thank you guys so much for asking questions. Ask questions down in the comment section below this video. Also, again, the Learn to Garden video series, the weekly garden planner are both $50 off. Thank you to everyone who came to the open garden, and we'll do it again next year. Thanks for watching.